All right, good evening, everyone. It's 6:01, so we will get started. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It looks like, unfortunately, we only have 3 attendees, but that is not entirely uncommon for this meeting in person. We had hoped that doing it virtually, we would have more participation, so maybe a few more people will join us. But my name is Adam McGill. I'm the city manager for the City of Novato. And this is the community's budget workshop. This is not a council meeting. It is, this meeting is being held on behalf of the community to have a little bit of a more of a free flow of information and be able to answer your questions that you may have, which will happen at the end of tonight's presentation. Tonight's virtual meeting has been scheduled based on the community's feedback from a survey that was completed. You told us that you preferred the meeting to be virtual on Zoom like we're doing now and on a week night such as tonight. So that's why we're here. This is an annual meeting where we would seek to get additional information from our community. But this will not be the only opportunity. There are many along the way. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And other opportunities to provide community engagement or participation, ask questions, or just let us know what you're thinking. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our website by tomorrow, including the presentation that you're going to see. So for those that missed the meeting live here tonight, you can go back and watch it, and certainly we're always available for questions from our community. As I've indicated, this, if we could advance the slides, this is your opportunity to provide input on the city's budget. We know your time's valuable, and tonight what we're going to cover, we've already of course done the welcome, but we're going to get into the budget development process, how that works, the operating budget overview. We're going to get into the capital improvement program and hit some of the highlights there of the big projects that are underway, have recently been completed, and what is in the pipeline coming. And of course, next steps of the budget process, and as already indicated, future opportunities for you to provide input for those that were not able to join us live tonight. There'll be many other places to do that. For those of you that are with us, we will take questions live at the end of the presentation. So just raise your hand, let us know that you have a question or a comment on tonight's presentation or something related to the budget, and we'll happily call on you and see if we can address your concern. We also have all of the department heads with us tonight are on the Zoom, and they're available if it's a specific question that the finance director or I are unable to answer. We will have the leaders of each of the city's departments available to step in to answer your questions if necessary. Allocation of resources for the city budget should always reflect the community's values and service priorities. So that's what the city council tries to do when they're representing you. Is they try to adopt a budget that best delivers on what the community's top priorities are. We of course can never fund everything that we would like to do, particularly here in Nevada. We have to be very resource conscious, but this is our effort to hear what those priorities are and try to develop a budget and present it to the city council that best reflects those priorities that we hear from our community. We did complete 2 surveys as part of this process. One, of course, as I noted already, talked about how you would like to receive this information, and tonight is an example of that based on those responses. The second survey was asked to provide feedback on the budget service priorities themselves, and the results of that survey will actually be presented to the City Council next Tuesday on April 12th. So we'd encourage you to attend that session as well and get even a deeper dive into the city's budget. Tonight's session is to gather more input from you tonight so that we can incorporate that into the April 12th session as well. In addition to these online surveys and this workshop, the budget is discussed at several public meetings between March and June of each year. We are required to adopt a budget prior to July 1st. Our fiscal year runs July 1st to June 30th. And the council will be discussing the budget many times again through March and June, and ultimately will adopt some budget, some type of a budget. It may not look the same as what was first presented in March. The council may make adjustments along the way, but ultimately the city council will adopt a budget in late June to take effect for July 1st. So the slides that for upcoming meetings are, and the dates, excuse me, are on the slide in front of you. April 12th, I've already mentioned, which is just next Tuesday, will really be the first session of the council where they'll get into the budget development study session, and they'll get a real big high level presentation of where we are and where we're headed. And then we'll begin to dive down at a lower level and get into more details as we keep inching forward. The next session will be May 10th at the City Council, and then June 14th we'll actually hold a legally required session, a budget hearing, which is a bit different, on June 14th. And ultimately the current plan, of course, all of this subject to change. We don't know what curveballs will come, but if all goes as planned, as it generally does, on June 28th at the council meeting, the council will adopt the next fiscal year budget. So your input is critical. Again, the budget should reflect the community's priorities, not what staff thinks best, not what I think is best. It's what you and your elected representatives believe best reflects what is needed in the community at this time. In addition, the budget to what's on your screen there and what I've talked about, the budget is also discussed at several other public meetings. The city has what's called the Citizens Oversight Finance Committee. This group of citizen volunteers meets monthly and discusses the budget in each of those sessions, and will continue to do so throughout this budget process. Those meetings are open to the public and also available for public comment or input. All of that information and when they meet and how to access those meetings is available on our website. The city's planning commission is engaged in the capital improvement program and the development of that process, and making sure that projects conform with the city's general plan. So certainly you can provide input and participate in those meetings as well. Again, posted on our website. Access and dates information can be found there. The city's Recreation, Cultural, and Community Service Advisory Commission does a similar, and those meetings are posted. You're welcome to participate in those and provide input on what you would like to see in our parks and recreation programs, and what makes it into their budget. And then our Complete Streets and Pathways Oversight Committee also meets when appropriate, and you can provide comment in those meetings, also open to the public, and provide your input into your priorities in regards to streets and pathways. You can always submit, absent of all of these meetings, you're not constrained to when these groups meet, or tonight's session. At any time, if you have any public input whatsoever, you can always submit your written comments to the city council or to city staff through our e-comment tool, which can be found on our website, or directly through email with our emails posted on the website as well. Your input really does help develop the city's budget. One last critical factor before I turn it over to our finance director to walk you through really everything I've been describing for you in more detail. So the city does have a strategic plan. Our current plan that's been adopted by the city council is a 2-year plan in progress now through June 30th of 2023. The city council identified 5 objectives in their work plan. Those are on your screen there: the living well together, great places, environmental stewardship, a city that works, and economic vitality. So these are the broad-based categories that the city council has determined are most important for us going forward in the development. Our budget, our work plan, and every bit of service that we deliver really should fit into one of these categories. So we're working strategically towards these goals. Some examples, though, of the type of work items that could be found in the strategic plan, which is available on our website as well for you to review in full detail, is some sustainability and environmental projects, an improved online building permit system with an emphasis on the improvements for the customer. So those of you applying to permits will have a more efficient and improved process. So we're developing that, or studying those systems now, that software. We hope to bring that online soon for the public. Of course, homelessness is a priority for the city, and we heard loud and clear from our community and our survey that this issue is on everyone's mind as well. The development of the train depot area and downtown, where we now have a smart station. If you see in the next, I think that's May 10th council meeting. If you're interested in that site, there might be some announcements on that at the May 10th council meeting on how we might energize and activate that space, which is really exciting in the future. So pay attention to that, likely on May 10th, but always subject to change. So check the city council's agendas for those details. And of course, most importantly, and really why we're here tonight, is fiscal sustainability. None of this matters if we don't have our fiscal house in order. We don't have the proper amount of revenue to provide the services that the community expects and deserves. And lastly, a final example of a work item in the strategic plan is internal work. So updating our city policies and procedures for our internal operations. Many of these have frankly not been touched in a considerable amount of time, become dated, and slow down our ability to work efficiently through our own internal work processes as a workforce. We need to improve those so we're not bogged down on those types of things, and we're working on more external issues for our community. So these are some examples that will be in the budget. They're part of the strategic plan. They'll be presented to the council through these many sessions, and ultimately we hope the council will adopt these in June. Again, the full strategic plan is available on our website. All of these things I mentioned, if you go to our website and you go to the Connect page, you can literally sign up for what your interests are. So if you're interested in projects, street projects, homelessness, budget issues, you just check the box, tell us what you would like, and we'll feed you that information as new information becomes available. You'll get that in the form of an email when we have an update on those things. So there's lots of ways to stay connected with us. Of course, all of our social media platforms, our newsletter. You go to our website, you sign up for anything you're interested in, and we'll deliver. We won't bog you down or your inbox with things that you're not interested in. You get to pick and choose what is the priority for you, or what you're interested in your neighborhood, as a particular project in your neighborhood, or whether it's the train depot or just our budget. You check the box, tell us, and we'll get you the information that you need. So with that, I'm going to turn it over now to Amy Cunningham, our finance director, and she's going to walk you through our budget and the budget process. And again, at the very end of tonight's presentation, we'll take your questions. Again, thank you very much for being here. Your input really matters. And those of you that are watching this later and not live with us, again, please get us your input as well. The door is not closed at the end of this meeting. Thank you.
I was clicking unmute on Adam. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to be focusing on the operating budget, primarily the general fund portion of the operating budget. The operating budget is the general fund piece is an indicator of the city's overall fiscal stability. And quite frankly, this is the fund we have the most control over how to use. Let's see, the table on this slide provides a snapshot of the city's 21-22 general fund budget. The general fund is the primary source of revenue for the operating budget. It's the funding that pays for day-to-day services and operations throughout the city, like police services, streets and park maintenance, and recreational programming. There are no restrictions on the use of this fund, and the council can decide how best to use these monies on local services. Other restricted fund categories, things like gas tax, can only be used for specific purposes. And usually those restrictions put into place are by other regulating or granting agencies. So the general fund is much more flexible and gets used for a lot of things that we don't get special funding for. So again, those things like police services, maintenance throughout the community, our recreation programs. You can see that the amended budget deficit for this year is approximately $357,000. This is despite over $3.2 million in cuts in fiscal year 2021, which included staff cuts to our streets, parks, and facilities maintenance and recreation programs. And while most of this was in response to the pandemic, some of it is just because of the city's kind of emerging fiscal condition. Significant ongoing cost containment measures were put into place in 21 and 22, but obviously those were not enough because the budget's still not balanced here today. In fact, this budget includes nearly $1 million in one-time funds to support ongoing operations. While some of this is certainly the result of the pandemic, as I stated before, some other factors that have led to this situation include depletion of our Measure F funds, which was our local sales tax dollars. Those were being used to support ongoing critical operations in the community, and essentially a general flattening of revenue along with increasing expenses prior to the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic situation has changed our financial picture, not for the better. Over the past few years, in fact, the city's had to rely on one-time funds to pay for many services and projects that otherwise would not have been able to be provided. And I'll talk about that in a moment. This slide provides an overview of the city's general fund revenue. We estimate about $44.7 million in revenue this year, with about 8% coming from one-time monies. As you'd expect, general fund revenues were severely hit by the pandemic. Fortunately, as the impacts of that recede, we're seeing recovery in many of these different revenue categories. Our two largest revenues are property tax and sales tax. Property tax at 37% of general fund revenue, or $16.7 million, is the largest share of city revenue for the current year. This property tax is tracking as expected, and we expect to hit our budgeted target by June 30th. So that's some good news there. Historically, in this category, we've experienced incremental year-over-year growth. Generally, it takes 18 to 24 months for outside economic factors to impact property tax revenues. This is due to timing of property valuations and issuance of property tax bills. So when the city ultimately receives its portion of these funds, it's somewhat delayed. I guess the good news about that delay is that property taxes is stable, and if there is ever an expected decline, we do have time to prepare for that. Sales tax. Sales tax is about 32%, or $14.3 million. It's the city's second largest share of revenue, and it has definitely seen some impacts related to the pandemic. I'll talk a little bit more about what's going on in sales tax in the next slide. A couple of other things that I wanted to highlight on this slide included in the other tax category is our transient occupancy tax, or our hotel tax. While there's been significant improvement in the travel industry over the past year, business travel has still not recovered, and there's anticipation that things like Zoom, as we're here right now, are going to kind of suppress recovery in that area over the longer term. We're watching this revenue stream very closely right now to see what it looks like into the future. And for 21-22, we budgeted about $1.6 million in revenue for TOT. I'm going to put myself on mute for a second here. It's allergy season. It's not the time to be doing presentations. I'm sorry. A couple other areas I wanted to touch on briefly in the charges for services category. This includes things like registration fees for recreation programs, gymnastics, and facility and park rentals. We do expect these revenues will increase next year as demand for group recreation experiences and gatherings continues to increase. But along with that, expenses that were reduced during the pandemic related to these programs will also grow. And as a side note, our recreation department this week launched their new online registration system, and it has been incredibly successful. We'll be talking about that next week as well. So going back and hitting on sales tax again for a moment, like many cities, we use sales tax consultants to analyze revenue and economic trends. And these consultants also provide us with quarterly projections on our collections. The good news is that our latest projections through the second quarter of our fiscal year, that the fourth quarter of the calendar year, through December of 21, it looks like our sales tax recovery is very strong. So that's the good news. There was exponential growth in online sales during the pandemic, but now that businesses are open again, brick and mortar store sales are improving as well. The latest report indicates that there's been strong recovery in fuel and service stations, restaurants and hotels, primarily in the casual dining category, and in general consumer goods, so Target, Costco, those kinds of stores. That is, of course, on the heels of the record-breaking auto sales and spike in recreational vehicle and equipment sales experienced earlier in the pandemic. While this is all good news, our consultants are cautioning us that inflation, interest rate hikes, staffing shortages, supply chain issues, which we're becoming all too familiar with, and volatile fuel prices may suppress further recovery in this category in the coming year. As I mentioned earlier, the city's been fortunate to receive one-time funds that have been used to supplement costs for service delivery. For fiscal year 2021, the city received about $7.1 million in one-time general fund revenue from several sources. Those included a long-term development agreement that finally came to fruition, sale of the Hamilton commissary parcel, and fiscal year 18-19 general fund savings. So these are savings that staff was able to realize in the budget because they were being fiscally responsible with the resources that were provided. The council's consciously made an effort to use these funds only for one-time costs or in areas that will strengthen the city's long-term fiscal stability. Funds have been allocated for state-imposed mandates where the city has no discretion, things like completion of a housing element and climate adaptation plans, and election redistricting processes. And the council's also made conscious decisions to invest resources to reduce future liabilities. So things like our OPEB and pension rate stabilization trust. And the council also made a decision to invest $1.2 million back into the insurance reserve to replenish that had been depleted in a prior year. The city also expects to receive $9.1 million in federal American Rescue Plan dollars over 2 years. So we're expecting the second piece of that in the next few weeks here. This money was intended to help the community recover from the effects of the pandemic and backfill lost revenue. Without these funds, we would have had to make much more significant service reductions over the last 2 years or use more of our emergency reserves. Initially, $650,000 was allocated to support ongoing services. That amount was increased to nearly $1 million as part of the mid-year budget review. And funding was also allocated to other one-time uses such as technology improvements that would enhance customer service delivery, to address homeless initiatives, to support our business community that was also hard hit by the pandemic, and to complete infrastructure and safety improvements throughout the community. While helpful to have these funds available for use, obviously, they're one-time in nature and can't be depended on to support ongoing costs. This was an opportunity for the city council to address some unmet needs and help the business community at the same time, and as well mediate some of those community safety issues. So we're very thankful for these funds and we think that we've invested them wisely. This slide shows how Novato's property tax rate compares to other cities in the county. Novato has the lowest rate at 7%. You can see that over here in red. Compare this with the largest city in the county, San Rafael. Their rate is 12.2%, or even the highest rate cities of Mill Valley at 25.8%, or San Anselmo and Larkspur, which are at about 21-22%. This slide shows the history of how and why the city's property tax rate is so low as compared to our other neighboring agencies. Again, Novato's rate is 7%, the lowest share of the 1% property tax in Marin County. And the rate is legally locked in and cannot easily be changed. Some of this is because of the timing and choices made by the city's founding fathers and the impact of Prop 13. As you may recall, Prop 13 caps annual growth at 2% in any given year. So this results in longtime property owners paying taxes that are significantly below the actual valuation of their properties. It's definitely one of the reasons that people stay in their homes, other than the fact that they love living in Novato. Of each tax dollar Novato property owners pay, this graphic shows how much the city receives as compared to other agencies. So when you are writing your check, probably in the next few days, this is how that money is allocated out. It's important to keep in mind that the city is expected and oftentimes mandated by the state or others to provide a wide variety of services. And as you look across this dollar bill that's divvied up here, many of these other agencies provide a single service. So the city is providing things from building inspection to recreational programming to streets and park maintenance or public safety. Novato Fire District, College of Marin are definitely singular disciplined in their approach. So you can see how this allocation is spread across the county, with the school district getting 31%, 16% going to the county, and then on down to Novato's 7%. In that other category, there are things like the library, the flood control zone, open space district, mosquito abatement district, the sanitary district, water district, county transit, and some other kinds of services. This slide provides a breakdown of the city's sales tax rate. Novato's total rate is 8.5%. 6.25 of that goes, that's paid out, 6.25% of that goes to the state. The city receives 1%, as shown on line 2 there in bold, State of California Uniform Local Tax, that's Novato's share. Plus the city also receives 25 cents for Measure C, which is on that last line down there. The balance goes to the other agencies shown. So Marin County Parks and Open Space, the Transit Authority, and SMART. The state sales tax cap is 9.25%. Novato is not yet at that cap, although some other agencies are, which we'll talk about in a second. In Novato, there's an additional 75 cents to get to the cap, and any jurisdiction could bring the question before voters. Previously, the city had voter-approved Measure F. Measure F was a 1/2 cent sales tax, and the current local tax, Measure C, is a 1/4 cent sales tax. Just so to get an understanding of what Measure F, how Measure F helped the community and supported our ongoing services, Measure F generated about $4.5 to $5 million per year. And Measure C generates about $2.5 to $2.9 million per year. So this equates to about 12.5 officers. The loss of these revenues has made it difficult for the city to maintain services, as costs overall do continue to rise. This slide here provides a comparison of sales tax rates in agencies throughout Marin County and in regional cities, places where Novato shoppers, or where people may shop in Novato or may go elsewhere to shop. Novato's rate at 8.5% is only higher than 4 Marin County cities, and those are cities that don't have large retail bases: Mill Valley, Belvedere, Ross, and Tiburon. You can see that these other communities, including Petaluma, San Rafael, and Corte Madera, are higher. In fact, some communities have received special legislation to exceed the 9.25 cap and keep their local funding local. El Cerrito and Emeryville are 2 examples of this. Finally, I just wanted to remind you that sales tax is paid by local community members and also visitors. And not all goods are taxed. There are some instances where goods aren't taxed, such as groceries and prescription medication. Those are exempt from sales tax. Moving on here, the council has long recognized the city's fiscal challenges, and in February of 2020, just prior to the pandemic, the council identified 5 areas to explore to generate some additional revenue for the city. Going down the list, a 2% TOT measure, that's the hotel tax, was passed by voters in 2020. Thank you for your support of that. We're excited to have new hotels coming online in the future that will help us generate some ongoing revenue there. We're in the process of exploring a sales tax measure, and that will be discussed in more detail at upcoming city council meetings over the next few months. Staff is reviewing the Hamilton Trust uses, and we'll be discussing potential options on that at upcoming council meetings as well. In disposition of city-owned property, one property, the Hamilton Commissary parcel, which I spoke about before, was sold last year, and there are more parcels under discussion for sale right now. And finally, the solid waste franchise fee was discussed just last month at the council meeting. Staff will continue to report out on these areas to council on a periodic basis, and our immediate focus is certainly on those areas that generate ongoing revenue. Ongoing revenue is what's needed to sustain our services. We can't count on our limited one-time revenue over the long term to provide these ongoing services to the community. Have a couple more slides and then you get to hear from Chris Blunk, our Public Works Director. This slide shows how the general fund operating budget is distributed by category. Expenses for 21-22 are estimated at $45.4 million. So you can see there the big personnel cost in red. That makes sense. 66% of the operating budget goes to personnel. The city is a service organization and exists to provide services to the community. Those services can only be provided through city staff. So 66% or 2/3 of the budget is allocated towards personnel. The other third is for supplies, contract services, utilities, and other items necessary to support staff in delivering those services to you. And those costs are not immune to price increases either. And finally, I just wanted to talk about our personnel or staffing allocation over the past few years for a couple minutes. This slide shows how city staff has been allocated over the past 4 years. Currently, there are 190.5 full-time employees delivering services to you in the community. In response to falling revenue in September of 2020, the council made the hard decision to reduce staff significantly. In fact, 17 positions or over 8% of the city's workforce was eliminated. Fortunately, many of these positions were vacant at that point in time, limiting the number of actual staff that were ultimately laid off. However, that said, those were staff who were delivering services out there. While we did add back 2 positions this year, we're still 18 positions below where we were in 18-19. Ultimately, however, if the community wants services to return to pre-pandemic levels, current staffing will not be sufficient to provide those services. As we've already seen and experienced, demand for services is growing as the pandemic recedes. This is great news, but it does significantly challenge us to deliver services, especially with a growing deficit. We don't have the option to further reduce staff and not have an impact on it. I said that wrong. So we don't have the option to further reduce staff. Our deficit will continue to grow if we do add staff, but if we don't add staff, we just won't be able to deliver those services. I think I got it straight that time. So thank you for your time and attention. Before I turn this over to our Public Works Director, Chris Blunk, I just wanted to mention a couple of final things here. There is a budget in brief that highlights the budget and it's available on the city's website. So look for that budget in brief there. It's a quick summary and provides detail about all of the ways that we receive revenue and how it's being used. And please continue to participate in the city's budget process. Understanding your priorities is critical to shaping the budget and provide you with the services that you ultimately want. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Blunk, Public Works Director. And
thank you, Amy.
After slides.
Thank you, and good evening. Thank you to members of the public who've joined us tonight. And for those that couldn't join us tonight who are watching the video, I'm happy to give some information about the preparation of the capital improvement program budget. To get started at a high level, the capital improvement program is a 5-year capital improvement planning tool. This is because a lot of our capital projects take multiple years to plan and design and build. We need to be able to program funding out future years so that we can have these longer term projects have a place to live. That's really what the program is. We do update the funding and the projects annually as a part of the city's budget process. So that's what we're doing here tonight. And the capital improvement program seeks to identify and prioritize projects based on regulatory mandates, general plan and strategic plan initiatives, input that we receive from the community as well as the city council, assessment reports and other planning documents that we have that assess the condition of our infrastructure, and then the restrictions that we have on our capital revenues, not just the amount of funding that comes in, but also how that funding can be used and be spent. So we try to match up the right dollars with the right projects. So next I'll talk a little bit about our program objectives and goals. So not project specific, but really CIP program specific. One of our goals for this fiscal year is to close out all the completed projects and then reprogram any remaining funding. We laughed a little bit earlier today and said, we're going through and finding all the change in the couch cushions. We're going to see if we can get ourselves a pizza. There are remaining funds in a lot of projects that haven't been fully closed out yet. And so with things being tight, this is a great opportunity for us to try to go and put that funding to work. We're also trying to simplify the accounting process of our capital projects. We have some projects that have multiple funding sources. It becomes very complicated to try to pay invoices and track those dollars when we have 7, 8, 9 different funding sources that might be contributing to each dollar spent. So we're trying to minimize that with new projects. We also want to create new projects as placeholders to address our major infrastructure needs. The council recently adopted a storm drain master plan that identifies millions of dollars worth of storm drain improvements that need to be made. We're aware of our wooden streetlight poles. Several of them need to be, many of them need to be replaced. We have some pump station controls in Hamilton that need to be replaced. And so we want to make sure that we have placeholders in the program for all of that critical infrastructure. We also want to reconcile all of our special revenue sources, make sure that we've got the right amount of reserve funds sitting in those accounts, but that we're also putting those dollars to work and making sure that we're getting projects done. And then, and I've been talking about this for a couple of years, we just haven't gotten there. We really need to publish our capital program with our active projects in a way that's simple for the public to be able to go and see. And we'd like to do that on the website. We get a lot of questions. It's not easy to find this the way that it's posted with the budget document. So we're going to explore ways to make this very available to the public and try to push that on the website. Our project-specific delivery goals coming up for next fiscal year, we are going to begin the right-of-way acquisitions for the Novato Boulevard widening project, which is very exciting. We have recently completed the EIR and the public comment period for that. We're finalizing that document. We'll bring that back to the City Council, hopefully for adoption sometime this summer, and then be able to start with the right-of-way acquisition process for that project. We will be designing and installing, hopefully by the end of the calendar year, several new crosswalks and traffic calming measures. It's really citywide. I think we're looking at something like 30 locations citywide, and I'll have more details on that at a future CIP budget meeting as a part of the budget process. And then we're also trying to finalize the design work for Olive Avenue widening at Redwood Boulevard. And you can see in the clip below some of the engineering work that's gone into preparing the plans for that project. A few more of our delivery goals. We're just ordered the new playground equipment for the Pioneer Park, the small play area. That's going to be more inclusive equipment for kids of different abilities. It'll have a pour-and-play surface that's accessible, and we'll be installing kind of a low decorative but perimeter fencing around that area, around that park. So we're excited to get that done. We are planning to construct the Roland Boulevard Road Diet project and the Class 1 multi-use path behind the Vintage Oaks Shopping Center by the end of the year. We intend to acquire and install a new SCADA system for the Hamilton pump stations. SCADA is an acronym for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. So basically, it's an electronic control system for the pump stations that gives real-time data to the operator, remote operation, and we can very carefully monitor the pumps and how much we're pumping and when we're pumping. We also will be going out to bid very shortly on the pump station #1 project at Marin Valley Mobile Country Club. It's about a $1.5 million sewer pump station replacement. And we will be seeking federal infrastructure grant funding for all the projects that we think would be good eligible candidates. A few updates on some projects that we get asked about frequently. The Novato Boulevard widening project I mentioned, we have just about finalized the EIR, and we'll be bringing that back to the council for adoption this summer. The Grand Avenue Bridge project, bridge replacement at Virginia Avenue at Novato Creek there is entirely shovel ready. The plans and specifications are completed. We have all of the environmental permits secured and in place. We have all of the right-of-way in place, but this project is funded by the Highway Bridge Program, federal funding. And the program, I heard last week, is actually backlogged 17 years. So we're looking at other fund sources and potentially some of the other federal infrastructure grant funding to see if we can possibly get this project constructed with other federal funds as opposed to the HBP funding. We're continuing to work with Caltrans to try to see if we can make this project a priority, but we're competing against many, many other communities, and unfortunately that program is completely underwater. Olive Avenue widening, we're working on finalizing the design and environmental documentation, and we're coordinating with the developer of the adjacent project to make sure that the city's project and that private development project sync up well. I already mentioned the Pioneer Park Small Playground, and the last one on the list here is our DeLong Diablo Corridor Highway Safety Improvement Program project. So we received a federal grant, about $1.5 million, to help make some safety enhancements on the DeLong Diablo Corridor, and we'll be bringing back to the council soon some of the design concepts for what that project will look like. I'd be remiss to not mention some of the work our capital engineering staff have been very, very busy the last few years, working hard through the pandemic, continuing to deliver projects. I believe in this last fiscal year, you got on the screen here, we repaved a good portion of San Marin Drive, replaced a $1.5 million pump station at Marin Valley. That was the pump station #2. We're going to get started on station #1 very soon. We replaced a failing retaining wall at Pioneer Park. We finalized the storm drain master plan and are now able to use that to identify new projects and build them into the CIP. We installed a backup generator for the city administrative office, repainted and waterproofed the administrative building here, and also replaced the EV chargers at city facilities, and are working on installing a few more new EV chargers at those facilities. So our staff have been working very hard and very appreciative of all of their efforts in delivering these projects. A couple revenues of note, special revenues that typically go into the capital program. We have our gas taxes, both the highway user tax account and the road maintenance rehabilitation account. Looks like they'll be coming in at about $2.8 million. That's up 10% over last fiscal year. So that's great to see. At CaliforniaCityFinance.com, Michael Coleman, that's the source of those numbers. I was fortunate enough to sit through a presentation of his about a week or so ago, and it looks like we can anticipate further growth in those gas taxes in the next few years. Not 10% growth, but maybe 2 to 3% growth before things start to taper off. So that's good news going back into our streets maintenance. As Amy mentioned before, About $1.25 million was approved in the federal ARPA funding, the American Rescue Plan Act one-time funds that came into the city. And so those are supporting some high priority, high need projects. Our Transportation Authority of MARIN, Measure AA, transportation sales tax estimates for next fiscal year is about $1.25 million, 1.26 million. And our parks, well, that's also up. Our parks, county parks Measure A sales tax, that program is sunsetting, and the renewal of that program is actually going to be on the June ballot. Typically, that brings in between $400,000 and $450,000 to the city. At the tail end of the program here, next fiscal year, we're only looking at about $180,000. So that's a pretty good loss for us. And like I said, that's on the June 22 ballot for renewal. So what we're doing right now with those funds is we're looking at all the projects that we have in the CIP and the need that we have that we're seeing in our assessment reports, the regulatory mandates, and then the initiatives from the general plan and strategic plan, direction that we get from the council and community input. We're trying to match the right type of funding to the right type of projects, really to get the highest and best use of those funds. But in addition to that, as I think most people are aware, there are a lot of grant opportunities available right now with the federal infrastructure bill that was passed and the amount of money that's coming into California through those programs, as well as other programs like MTC's OBAG 3 and ATP grants. So we're going to be trying to closely match what we believe to be good candidate projects to be federalized, because there's additional requirements that come along with federalizing a project. We have to do NEPA documentation in addition to CEQA. We have to typically work through Caltrans local assistant program and provide a lot of extra documentation and support in order to be reimbursed for these projects. We also have to have local match funding typically put on against the grants and other requirements that come through these programs. So we're trying to find projects that we think would be good candidates to federalize, and also projects where we have a scope of work that we think will be a good eligible, would be competitive is what I was trying to say, against other eligible projects in other municipalities. So we'll be trying to match some of the grants that you can see on the screen here up against our projects. And I just mentioned a few of them on the screen that I think might be decent candidates. In addition to that, we do have quite a bit of other funding needs. We've gotten quite a bit of calls recently about wooden streetlight replacements, where we have wooden streetlights that are rotten and falling over, or lights aren't working anymore. We estimate we have about 1,500 wooden streetlights in Novato that are all at the end of their service life, and cost estimates to replace those with modern metal poles are about $8,000 a piece. So obviously not something we'd be able to do at one time or in 1 year, but there's a huge need there over the next several years in the replacement of that infrastructure. The Storm Drain Master Plan also identified a couple projects, about $3 million for the Linwood Slough Sunset Parkway Storm Drain Project, Bahia Drive Storm Drain upgrades, about $1 million. We know that we are at the end of the service life for the roofing at the Margaret Todd Senior Center and the Hill Gym, and that the siding is ready to be probably heavily replaced, or at least a very good paint job. And that we also have many accessibility upgrades that need to be made around the city, particularly at San Marin Drive and San Andreas Drive, where I think we have something like 16 curb ramps that all need to be replaced or constructed. So quite a bit of need, and we'll be trying to build those into the program, seeking grant funding, and trying to take the revenues that we do have and try to put them to best and highest use. And that's it for me. I'll turn things back over to Amy.
Thanks, Chris. So we have kind of given you some basic information. Obviously, there's a lot more details here, but it can get a little trying to listen to us talk for an hour. So now it's your turn to ask us questions. And before I turn it over to our Assistant City Manager, Jessica Dekine, to help facilitate the questions, I just wanted to remind you of the April public meeting so that you can participate in the budget process. So tonight, obviously, is the budget workshop. We have Finance Committee on Thursday morning where we'll be talking about some of the budget preparation information, start talking about the foundational pieces, and then the council study session on April 12th. And that's it. Thank you, Jessica. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Chris, for that presentation. Just a reminder, if you're joining us on Zoom, you can raise your hand to ask a question. If you have a question and you're on a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. And then once you're called on, you can press *6 to unmute yourself if you're joining us again by phone. So I'll just wait here a second and see if we have any hands raised. I don't see any yet. Amy and Adam, I think both. Oh, good. Yes. Here we have a question from Pam Drew.
Hi. Not muted anymore. So I just wanted to thank Chris Blunt and the rest of the city for the wonderful job on the retaining walls at Pioneer Park. It looks like it'll last forever. It looks so sturdy. And we're also looking forward to the new play equipment for the younger children. So thanks again. Bye-bye.
Oh my goodness. We love a thank you during a budget workshop. Thank you, former council member Pam Drew. I'll pause here for just a second and remind everybody that a copy of our slides from this evening and this video will be posted and available at novato.org/budget tomorrow morning. Staff just needs a little bit of time to edit the first part of the meeting where we're all just logging in. I don't see any other hands. City Manager McGill, I see you putting your camera back on. Are you ready to call it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we only have a handful of community members with us, so they haven't raised their hand by now. And thank you to former council member Drew for her comments that we can wrap things up, and we'll continue this conversation at future meetings. All right, I guess that's me. Okay. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again over the next few months as we develop the budget and bring it to the council for final consideration on June 28th. In the meantime, we're always available by phone or email, and let us know your thoughts. So we hope to see you soon. We are back in person, by the way, for city council meetings beginning on April 12th. There still will be a Zoom hybrid option for those that would prefer to stay home or are unable to attend in person. So continue to look at our agendas closely, and the instructions of how to participate in the meeting will be there. The Zoom will be similar, but we will be back in the council chambers on April 12th. So if you're up to attending that, we hope to see you then. We hope everybody has a good night. Thanks for joining us.